There are some things that words just can't fix. A breakup is one of them. She left. Maybe she told you it wasn't working. Maybe she walked away with anger. Maybe she didn't say anything at all. But deep down, she expected you to do what every other man does. React. Text her, call, beg, cry, lose control. She expected to win emotionally. That's the part no one says out loud. But this time, something different happened. You said nothing, you didn't chase. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't try to prove your worth. You vanished. And that silence didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it did more damage than any angry message or emotional confession ever could. Today, I'm going to break down why your silence is the most powerful move you've ever made, and why in her world you didn't become forgotten, you became unforgettable. By supporting this message, you're not just helping us grow. You're helping this message reach men who are tired of being emotionally destroyed and mentally manipulated. You're making truth accessible, and in return, I'll keep delivering the deepest insights, tools, and mind shifts that change lives, not just moments. Stay locked in. You're not just watching a video, you're entering a new chapter of your life. Silence breaks the ego. When a relationship ends, especially one where emotions ran high or expectations were unmet, most people anticipate noise. The fights, the desperate calls, the attempts to fix what's already broken. That's the typical script. And in most cases, that's exactly what happens. The man breaks down, reaches out, sends long messages, tries to remind her of what they had, and tries to pull her back from the decision she made. Deep down, that's exactly what she counted on. Even if she was the one who left, even if she said it was over, even if she acted like she was done, there was always an expectation that he would react, that he would do something, that he would give her proof that she still mattered even in her absence, that her leaving had emotional power. Because to her ego, your pain after she walks away is validation. It says, I had worth. I was the prize. He couldn't let me go. But when you say nothing, not even a whisper, the entire illusion falls apart. That silence isn't just quiet, it's a shock to her system. She doesn't know how to process it. She can't turn your silence into a weapon against you. She can't say you were obsessive because you didn't chase. She can't say you were manipulative because you gave her peace. She can't even say you were immature because you responded with calm detachment. Most importantly, she can't place herself at the center of your story anymore. Because the moment you went silent, the story stopped being about her. It became about you. Your silence forces her into a place she never thought she'd be. A world where she has no control, no reaction, no emotional leverage. She's used to men being predictable. She's used to tears, paragraphs of pain, long explanations. You gave her none of that. You didn't even give her closure. And that's what breaks the ego. Not the loud ending, but the invisible one. Now she's left sitting with a decision she thought she could walk away from without consequences. And yet the silence follows her. In the middle of her day, when she checks her phone, there's still nothing. No message, no missed call, no post, no digital breadcrumb that tells her you're unraveling. She might laugh with her friends, post selfies, or even try to make it seem like she's moved on. But deep down, the question grows louder every day. Why hasn't he said anything? That silence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything she never wanted to see. Because without your validation, she's forced to confront her own. Without your attention, she's left alone with her own thought. And that's when doubt creeps in. At first, it's subtle. Maybe he's just giving me space. Then it shifts to maybe he doesn't care. Finally, it becomes maybe I made the biggest mistake of my life. Her confidence turns into questioning. Her pride turns into uncertainty. Her ego, once inflated by your availability, starts to sink under the pressure of your complete disappearance. What's wild about all of this is that you didn't do anything loud. You didn't storm out. You didn't post emotional quotes or subliminal stories. You simply disappeared with calm, with peace, with purpose. And that's what she never saw coming. That's what makes you unforgettable. Because the world remembers those who made a scene, but it obsesses over those who walked away without a word. Silence breaks the ego, not because it's aggressive, but because it's absolute. It tells her, without telling her, that you don't need to prove yourself anymore, that you are no longer trying to be chosen, that you don't need her to validate your worth. And that message, delivered in silence, is louder than any scream, clearer than any letter, and more unforgettable than any goodbye. Because it wasn't just silence, it was strength, it was self-respect. It was the final act of letting go and doing it in a way she never had control over. And that's exactly what makes your silence the most devastating answer she never expected. Predictability kills respect. Respect doesn't disappear in an instant. It fades slowly, subtly, in patterns, in habits, in repeated expectations that are never broken. The most dangerous pattern you can fall into as a man, especially in a relationship, is becoming predictable. In the beginning, she may have admired your consistency, the way you always replied, the way you reassured her, the way you responded every time she pulled away, doubted the relationship or tested your patience. But over time, that same consistency became familiarity. And familiarity without boundaries kills tension. It removes mystery. It turns desire into routine. She knew exactly when you'd text. She knew you'd forgive her every time she disrespected your effort. She knew if she withdrew, you'd lean in harder. Slowly, what once attracted her began to bore her. Not because you weren't valuable, but because you were too available. See, what most men don't understand is that comfort and respect are not the same thing. A woman can feel safe around you and still lose attraction. She can feel emotionally cared for and still stop seeing you as the man she wants to be with. Because attraction thrives in space, in tension, in uncertainty. When she knows everything about your next move, your emotions stop being a force and start being background noise. Once she stops wondering about you, she stops thinking about you. Not because she wants to, but because there's nothing left to figure out. You've become a solved puzzle, a song she's heard too many times, a page she's already read. But the moment you stop playing that role, when you change the pattern, everything changes. When you don't call her back after an argument, when you don't reply to her late-night text message, when you don't comment on the story she posted just to get your attention, that's when the script breaks. And in that break, her mind lights up. She can no longer predict your reactions, and that unpredictability brings you back into focus. You're no longer an emotional doormat. You're no longer a source of instant comfort. You're a question mark. And human psychology is addicted to questions it can't answer. Unpredictability doesn't mean playing games. It means refusing to be controlled by another person's expectation. It means being emotionally grounded enough that you don't respond just because she expects you to. It means letting her feel the absence of your energy without warning, without explanation, and watching how she reacts to that. Because when you're always chasing, always reaching, always reacting, she's in control. She holds the emotional lead. But when you pull away and don't return like clockwork, you flip that control upside down. Now she's the one wondering where she stands. Now she's the one checking your online status. wondering why you're not watching her story, scrolling through your feed for signs of life. And that shift, that reversal of roles, is where respect is reborn. Not because you're being cold, but because you're being intentional. When a man becomes less predictable, he becomes more powerful. Not in a manipulative way, but in a magnetic one. Mystery isn't about hiding. It's about having layers. It's about not needing to expose every thought, every emotion, every fear in the name of transparency. It's about letting her realize she doesn't fully know you. And that discovery is what reignites the spark. Predictability is safe, but safe doesn't stir desire. Predictability is warm, but warm doesn't stay unforgettable. To be remembered, to be respected, to be wanted long after the moment is gone, you must become a man who values his unpredictability. A man who doesn't answer every call for comfort. A man who doesn't flinch when his silence is misunderstood. Because she'll never say it out loud. But the moment you stopped being the man she could read like a book was the moment she started reading you again. Not because you changed, but because you stopped performing. You stopped giving away your soul for attention. And when that happened, when you broke the pattern, you didn't just become someone she respected again. You became someone she couldn't forget. Mystery fuels obsession. The human brain is not built to live with uncertainty. It's designed to close loops, finish stories, and understand outcomes. That's how we survive. That's how we sleep at night, by believing we know what's happening around us. And that's exactly why your silence is so powerful, because it leaves no closure, no explanation, no pattern to analyze. In the absence of answers, her mind does what every human mind does. It begins to create its own. That's where the obsession starts. You didn't chase her, you didn't argue. You didn't send one last text to clear the air. You didn't give her anything. And that's what drives her mad. She doesn't know if you're hurt, if you've moved on, if you even care. She can't figure out if you're thriving or broken. You left without leaving a clue. No Instagram stories, no cryptic captions, no song lyrics hinting at heartbreak. You vanished like smoke. And the silence you left behind became a canvas for her mind to paint on. She starts to imagine your life. First, she pictures you sad, because that's what she expects. That's what she hoped for, in a way to know that she still had an effect on you. But when there's no sign of struggle, when there's no emotional residue in your trail, her mind shifts. Now she pictures you strong, detached, focused. Now she sees you in places she doesn't recognize, with people she doesn't know, doing things she never thought you'd do without her. And that thought, the possibility that you might be better off, that you might be healing, that you might even be happy, keeps her up at night, because that version of you, the one she can't see or control, is more powerful than anything you could have posted or said. Mystery isn't just attractive, it's addictive. And the most dangerous thing about it is that it grows. Every day you stay quiet, the mystery around you becomes heavier, deeper, more complex. She starts wondering what she missed, what she overlooked, what she took for granted. Her thoughts aren't based on reality anymore. They're fueled by emotion, memory, and fear. Those three things combined create obsession, because what she knows is no longer enough. She craves the unknown. She wants to unlock the version of you that's no longer available. She wants access again, not because she's ready to love you better, but because the mystery of your absence is more powerful than the comfort of your presence ever was. The beauty of this mystery is that you didn't manufacture it. You didn't fake it. You didn't play games to make her guess. You simply removed yourself from the equation. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped proving yourself. You stopped trying to be seen. And in doing so, you became unforgettable, because every other man gave her noise, gave her drama, and gave her reasons to forget them. You gave her silence, and that silence made her remember, obsess, replay, and wonder. There's a truth most people don't want to hear. When you overshare, when you post about your pain, when you try to remind someone of what they lost, they don't feel guilt, they feel power. They feel like they still have emotional control over you. But when you say nothing, when you leave them with no answers, no visuals, no closure, they feel powerless. That powerlessness becomes an itch they can't scratch, a question they can't stop asking. And that question grows louder with every day. You remain invisible. You didn't become a ghost. You became a riddle, a puzzle, a presence she can no longer predict. The human mind is not okay with unfinished puzzles. It obsesses, it spirals, it replays old data to try and make sense of what's happening now. That's why she scrolls through your old texts, your old photos, and the memories she used to dismiss, because now they're all she has. The past becomes her only connection to you, and because she doesn't have new content to distract her, those memories loop endlessly in her mind. You've become a mental soundtrack she can't turn off, not because you're loud, but because you're gone. Here's the final piece. The version of you she's imagining is probably better than reality, because her imagination builds a version of you that's perfect. A version that's unbothered, successful, emotionally whole, attractive, surrounded by options, desired by others, and completely out of reach. That version of you, built in silence, becomes a fantasy she can't compete with. And that fantasy is far more dangerous than any real conversation ever could be. Because you didn't create it, she did. People rarely let go of the stories they create on their own. Emotional distance builds psychological weight. Before the silence, you were always there. Emotionally present, constantly available, answering her calls even when they came in the middle of the night. Replying to texts even when they were laced with passive aggression or indifference. Explaining your feelings when she seemed confused. Trying to fix what she claimed was broken. You made your love visible. You made your loyalty loud. You made your pain soft enough for her to understand. And even if she didn't fully value that effort, she depended on it. She knew that no matter how distant she became, how moody, how disrespectful or inconsistent she acted, you would always be there. Like a lighthouse, constant, predictable, reassuring. Because you were always within reach, she never truly felt the need to reach back. But then something shifted slowly, subtly. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't write a dramatic goodbye. You didn't block her or announce your exit with theatrics. You simply stopped showing up the way she had come to expect. No more instant replies. No more soft explanations. No more emotional availability on demand. You didn't disappear physically, but your energy did. The warmth that she once felt in every message, every glance, every effort vanished. At first, she couldn't place what changed, but she felt it. The space between you started to stretch. And where there was once comfort, there was now confusion. That's the first weight of emotional distance. Confusion. See, emotional distance isn't about being cold, it's about being intentional. It's the art of preserving your peace by removing your emotional labor from someone who never reciprocated it. And when you do that, when you stop being the emotional crutch she leaned on without gratitude, everything she once took for granted becomes painfully noticeable. You no longer respond the way she wants. You no longer try to decode her mixed signals. You no longer adjust yourself to fit her moods. You no longer play the role of the emotionally available man who's just trying to make it work. That silence, that deep emotional withdrawal, becomes heavier than any argument could have been. It doesn't feel like freedom to her. It feels like gravity. She begins to feel the absence of your presence in ways she can't put into words. She scrolls through her phone and doesn't see your name. She opens her notifications expecting something, anything, and there's nothing. Not a hope you're okay, not a thinking of you, not even a simple take care. That emptiness is suffocating because now she realizes what your presence used to be. It was her emotional safety net, her invisible advantage, her secret proof that someone would always be there for her, even if she didn't know how to love them properly. Now she's left with silence, with space, with a version of you that no longer orbits her emotions. A version of you that has stepped outside her gravitational pull. The more she thinks about it, the more she realizes you're not just absent. You're indifferent. You're not waiting. You're not hoping. You're not even trying to prove a point. You've simply reclaimed your energy. And that truth is unbearable because emotional distance doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't attack, it withdraws. And withdrawal, when it's complete, is undeniable. She might pretend it doesn't bother her. She might post pictures, laugh with friends, and act like your silence means nothing. But deep inside, she's carrying weight. Emotional weight that grows heavier with each day you don't return, because she used to know where she stood. Even in conflict, she knew you'd come back. Even in tension, she knew you'd talk it out. But now you've stopped giving her signs. You've stopped showing your cards. And what that does is force her to sit with her own decisions, with her own ego, with her own silence. It's in that space that regret begins to bloom. Regret not just about losing you, but about not seeing your worth until you were no longer trying to prove it. The silence you gave her was never meant to hurt her. It was meant to heal you. But that's the part she didn't expect. That your peace would be found in the space she never respected. That your strength would grow in the absence she assumed you couldn't survive. She thought you needed her validation to feel valuable. But now she sees you never needed it. You only thought you did because you were emotionally close. And emotional closeness can blur judgment. It makes you believe that love is about constant giving. But now you understand that love without mutual effort is not love, it's sacrifice. And sacrifice that's never seen becomes bitterness. So you stopped sacrificing. You stopped showing up where you weren't celebrated. You stopped trying to explain your worth to someone who confused effort with weakness. That change, that quiet, emotionless shift, is now the loudest thing in her world. Because when emotional distance is real, not strategic, not reactive, but real, it marks the end. It says, I've let go without ever saying a word. And once a man truly lets go, not out of pain, but out of self-respect, there is no returning to who he used to be. And she can feel that deeply, constantly, heavily. You didn't stay silent to manipulate her emotions. You didn't walk away just to spark curiosity or create regret. You stayed silent because something inside you finally shifted. Not outwardly, but inwardly, a line was crossed. On the other side of that line was a man who no longer needed external approval to feel whole. The silence wasn't a tactic. It was a turning point. It was the first time you chose yourself, not out of spite or arrogance, but out of pure clarity. You realized that chasing someone who can't see your value is the fastest way to lose your own reflection. So you stopped, not out of weakness, not out of defeat, but because for the first time, you had nothing left to prove. This is where everything changes. Because when a man stops trying to be understood, when he stops explaining, defending, justifying, he frees himself from the trap of seeking validation from someone who was never ready to give it. And that kind of silence isn't empty. It's full of self-respect, full of healing, full of unspoken power. You stopped performing. You stopped auditioning for a role in someone else's life, where your presence was treated like background noise. And in that decision, in that quiet withdrawal, you became someone new, someone dangerous in the most beautiful way. This silence isn't cold, it's composed. It's not distance built from fear, it's distance carved out of wisdom. You no longer see her indifference as a challenge. You no longer take her mixed signals as mysteries to decode. You no longer accept inconsistency as love, because now your love is reserved, selective, rooted in peace. Not chaos in presence, not pursuit. You no longer chase connection, you attract alignment. And that shift, that inner transformation, cannot be undone, not by her words, not by her regret, not even by your own memories. Because the man you used to be, the one who needed closure, who needed answers, who needed to feel chosen, no longer exists. She might come back. She might test the waters again. She might send a message like a flare in the night, hoping your silence has softened. But the truth is, you're no longer standing where she left you. She's not coming back to the same man, because the man she left behind was still trying to prove himself. This man has already proven everything to himself. He doesn't need her permission to move forward. He doesn't need her validation to feel worthy. He doesn't need her love to feel full. He has peace. And peace is not something you trade for uncertainty. When you chose silence, you chose to become a mirror, not a microphone. You stopped projecting your pain outward and started turning inward. You asked the hard questions. Why was I fighting so hard for someone who... Why was I showing up for someone who only showed up when it was convenient? Why did I give so much to someone who made me feel like I was asking for too much? In that silent interrogation of your own truth, you didn't just find answers, you found liberation. There's a point in a man's life when he stops measuring his value by how others see him and starts measuring it by how deeply he respects himself. That's the power you stepped into. You became the man who doesn't raise his voice to be heard, who doesn't lower his standards to be seen, who doesn't hand over his energy to anyone who hasn't earned it. That kind of man is not just respected, he's remembered. Because silence, when it comes from strength, becomes legacy. It lingers, it echoes, and it becomes the space that makes others reflect. Your silence didn't push her away. It forced her to look at herself, to question everything, to realize that you weren't just another man. You were the moment she lost someone who would never beg, never chase, and never need to be needed again. That's the evolution, that's the power. And once you step into that version of yourself, there's no going back. You didn't write essays. You didn't leave voice notes. You didn't scream or cry or make a scene. You just walked away quietly, with calm, with strength. And now your silence lives in her mind like a permanent echo. She thought you'd break. You became unbreakable. She thought you'd chase. You became unreachable. And now she sees what you always had. Value. This isn't about revenge. It's not about punishment. It's about choosing yourself in a world that begged you to lose yourself. It's about understanding that your energy is a gift, not a guarantee. And that when you go silent, the world finally hears you.